from somebody from Riverside, California. And I had to have Joan listen to it. And I don't know who it is. He got a hold of one of our tapes, and he was listening to it and watching it. And he said it was absolutely, what did he say? Brilliant.
And then he laughed.
And he said, you know, I thought I was losing my mind thinking this stuff. He said, well, maybe I am, but now I know I'm not alone. It was good. All right, if we're ready, when we have a little congregation here, but we have a big one out there too, and these tapes go around. I wanted to tell you, one of our congregation is leaving. Now she's taking all the she can take. I wanted to tell you, and this may be of interest to you out there too. A lot of people have said, not a lot of people, but some people have said, it'd be nice if I had a tape, you know, a videotape of all of these exciting things that we've revealed over the last couple of years. Well, a few weeks ago, I did one for a group for Ursula, and I looked at it and I said to Joe, you know, this has everything that we have ever done, and it's exciting. It's a perfect tape if you want to show somebody who doesn't know what this is about and introduce them to it. And I have modestly titled the tape, Billy's Greatest Hits. So, I mean, you know, I just wanted to be, I wanted to be modest about it. But, so it is, in fact, I'll tell you something, we had one in the store and it sold out. Sold out today. So, yeah, so that was good. Okay, if we can get through the heat here, we'll talk about Buddha. See, you guys don't realize the heat rises. Why are you sitting behind a pole? See, now that's bad. Yeah, come on, let's move right now because, yeah, that's better. Okay. Because, you know, I'm standing up here and I'm sitting here going like this. Okay, Buddha. We've gone through a lot of Buddha teachings. And it's been a long time since we did anything in Buddha. And I wanted tonight to bring you something special. And I will. There's one of the, you know, there's not a whole lot of quotes from the Shakyamuni himself per se as quote, but there's a prayer that he uttered that was written down by somebody, and I'll share it with you tonight. But what he teaches and what we'll learn from the Buddha tonight is that in the search for truth, there are certain questions that are unimportant. That's interesting, isn't it? Because usually, you know, in Bible studies or in lectures of religion, it says, you know, these are the important things. And Buddha's turning around, as he usually does, and say, there are some things that are completely unimportant. And what he says is, how big is the universe? Where is God? What is the universe made of? What does it matter? You know, who cares? It's like when we were talking this morning, and then the teachings on Sunday morning, they're very deep now. It's not like it used to be, and then, you know, it requires a certain amount of paying attention because it's somewhat complex, but it's tying a lot of things together that are extremely deep. But as we said this morning, the idea of the story was that unless you touch the stone, the water can't flow. So it doesn't make any difference if you understand what the pineal gland is. It doesn't make any difference if you understand how it works. The point is to do it. And Buddha, in one of his lessons, and you know, sometimes if you go into a bookstore, Dalton's or whatever, and you can find them now, it's very popular, you can find little books that are the teachings of Buddha. And one of Buddha's teachings are of a man pierced by an arrow. And the story will sound silly to a certain extent, but understand that he's trying to convey wisdom to us who have been hurt and afflicted by the systems, by the things that have entered into our mind. And he says, the man is pierced by an arrow, and friends call a surgeon to remove the arrow and to treat the wound. And when the surgeon gets to the man and he's about to remove the arrow, the wounded man says, wait a minute, before you take this arrow out, I want to know who shot me. Was it a man or was it a woman? What was the bow made of? Was it big? Was it small? Was the arrow made of rattan or was it made of reed? And the man insists that before you remove the arrow, I want the answer to all of these questions. But as Buddha said, as the answers to the questions are being compiled, the poison will have time to circulate through the system and the man will die. And he says that's exactly what it is with religious people. They are trying to figure out, how does this work? What is this all about? Where does it? And they are sick. They have been pierced by all of the arrows that are the horrors of the systems, the horrors of life itself. And instead of actually pulling out that which is sick and cleansing themselves through the purity of that inner meditation, the poison circulates and they die. And they never have received a healing. So Buddha says the first duty is to remove the arrow and prevent its poison from spreading. Jesus, Yahshua the Christ, did not say that you should go to church. He did not say that you should read the Bible. He did not say that your prayers are that important. He did not say that you should dedicate it. What did he say? Okay, and this is what we should look at. He said on page 782 in the book of Matthew, in Matthew chapter 6, he said in Matthew chapter 6, something that to those who look at the scriptures literally is an impossibility. He said, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all of these things shall be added unto you. I had somebody come to me today and say that they had a particular desire to have something, and in their meditation they were trying to figure out how would they know if, what they wanted was coming true, because their mind might play tricks on them. And my answer to them was, as long as you have the desire, you can't find out. You can't. Your meditation has to be to grasp onto that which is the universal promise and allow life to develop. But as long as you have a desire, you'll never be able to find out, because your mind will say, well, that's not what you really wanted. It isn't a question of what you really wanted. It is a question of what nature wants you to have, and it is a question of this is presented to you. You've got to get into the position of sacrificing desires and allowing yourself to flow with what comes. And it's always good. But we're so used to say, see, what happens is religion teaches that there will be some God that will speak to you, or Jesus will say to you, this is what you should do, or you'll know what to do with your life. You'll never know. You'll react to what changes in your life. So what does he say? Yahshua, Jesus says, seek first the kingdom. And in Luke 17:21, he defines what that kingdom is in you. So what he says is the first thing you should do is seek inside of yourself, which is exactly what Buddha is talking about. You've got to come to grips with yourself. You've got to understand yourself. Look, when a destructive fire is raging in a building, it is not so important as to who started it as it is to put the fire out. That's what Buddha means. Buddha says all your religious questions and traditions should wait. First, let us together extinguish the fires of birth, old age, sickness, and death. And we could add so many to that. You've got to extinguish the fire. It doesn't make any difference who caused it. We were talking a moment ago about the death of somebody. It's not to make any difference whether it was somebody's idea that it was fate, somebody's idea that it was an accident, somebody's idea that maybe this was programmed. It doesn't make any difference. The idea is the situation occurred. What do? How do we address it? How do we deal with ourselves? Buddha states, in the presence of sorrow and suffering and pain, one should first search for a way to solve problems and devote oneself to practice that way. So what is your problem? And the problem of all people are the thoughts that we entertain. The problem of all people are the fears that we entertain, the guilt that we feel that's loaded onto us. So how do we deal with this? So Buddha instructs us to discern what is most important in our lives. To many Christians, and this is what really I had a difficult time with as I was going through the fundamentalism, the basis of the religion is, or the goal is, salvation of your soul. Salvation of the soul. And it totally eliminates that which is the prospering of the planet. It eliminates nature. It eliminates animals. It eliminates enjoyment. It eliminates everything. It is strictly one thing, the salvation of the soul. And yet that is totally contrary to the teachings of Jehoshua, Jesus the Christ, who said, no, the first commandment is love one another. Die to the self. Here they tell you that you've got to save yourself, and here Jesus says, no, you've got to die to yourself. Your salvation is not your business. The suffering of other people is your business. And that's what Buddha told me. And that's a beautiful thing to think about. And see, there's the problem. That's the problem of religion. Especially in the West, that's the problem of the Christian religion. The whole religion is based on a self-centered idea of, I've got to save myself. It has no regard other than to say, I want to see everybody get saved, but people may be starving to death, or people may be plagued, or animals may be brutalized, or children may be on drugs, and all of these types of things. For instance, you have them running around now helter-skelter about abortion. I think abortion is bad. I think abortion is an evil answer. But on the other hand, religion contributes to it because these same people who say they should not have an abortion are not prepared to deal with the question of sex. They can't talk about it. They can't even think about it because they've been taught by their teachers that it's a filthy thing and they have to shove it back. And so they all sneak around and do their little sex things, whatever they do, and pretend that they don't do them. And so they don't consider sex to be a pleasurable thing. They don't consider sex. Sex is an instinctive thing. Do you know why the world is overpopulated? Because everybody that's ever opened their eyes does it. Everybody, even people you think would never do it, are the top doers of it. And yet they deny it. The Pope does it. Everybody does it. And they deny they do it. And so what do they say? You cannot have an abortion. And I can understand that. But on the other hand, don't look at a person and say, we will not teach proper use of sex. We will not teach contraceptive. And that's what they do. So you create a monster. I create a monster. But it's not that you have created the monster between sex and abortion. You have created a monster because you're not able to deal with the reality of it. You can't deal with crop circles, religion, because they're real. You can't deal with sex because it's real. It overwhelms you. Yet they all sneak off and do it and then come out and gang up upon the world and gang up on all the people who take part in this thing. And you create a monstrosity. And so you've got to be willing to think about what are real problems. The meditation should be so that the energy of that which is God seeps into you and then flows from you to touch and change and make things right. Buddha gives an example of how we fail, even those who are enlightened. And look what happened this morning. Did you see what happened this morning? Here was Jacob. He's after Rachel. We're all after Rachel because Rachel is the child of promise. Rachel is the divine wife who is going to intercourse with us and produce the child of promise, Joseph. But he's lying in bed and it's dark, and he has served his 7 years for Rachel, and this woman gets in bed with him, and he has intercourse with it, and it's not Rachel, it's Leah, and the word Leah means weary. And look what happened. He did everything that he thought was right. But in the darkness, in other words, he was still in the dark. He still couldn't see. And when he was finally enlightened, he saw, I haven't been intercoursing with Rachel. I've been intercoursing with Leah because I've been deceived. And it talks about people who get into religion. And they think this is the right path. But when they get done, they realize they had the wrong spirit. They've been intercoursing with the left side and not intercoursing with the right side. So then the story goes on that he has to serve another 7 years, and after this next 7 years, then Rachel is given to him. Buddha gives an example of what happens to a lot of people that get involved in meditation, and I have seen it happen to people in here. The man goes to the forest, and he's looking for pith. I don't know what pith, but this is a real word, P-I-T-H. You're looking for pith. So he's going to pith it. Pith is spongy material located in the center of a tree. And I guess, they would get this stuff and sell it. But instead he returns with branches and leaves. He's satisfied. This is the best he could do. He worked all day, didn't get any pith, but he got branches and leaves, and he's satisfied. And Buddha compares that person to one who begins meditation, becomes a little enlightened, and then becomes proud. I found it. I know what I can do. I can teach other people. See? I can do this. I can do that. But Buddha says, no, that person can teach nobody. All that person's got is branches and leaves. Doesn't know anything. It's never found the center. Because it takes time. And Buddha's warning is this, and this is a quote from the Shakyamuni Buddha: seekers who become easily satisfied after little effort easily fall into idleness, which is no meditation. And listen to this, and these people will inevitably face suffering again. That's a strong statement. I'd like to somehow copy that maybe. I quoted you from the Shakyamuni Buddha. And I'll tell you something. When we first started the meditations, the place was packed. Gradually, people drop off. They don't come anymore. I can understand that. But look what he says. Seekers who become easily satisfied after little effort easily fall into idleness, no meditation. And these people will inevitably face suffering again. And then he goes on to say this: those who seek the true path to enlightenment, and I want you to listen to this very carefully. This is a quote from Buddha. Those who seek the true path of enlightenment must not expect an easy task or one made pleasant by offers of respect, honor, or devotion. In other words, what he's saying is, you must not seek to be rewarded because you think you've accomplished something in your spiritual walk through meditating. You blow the whole thing. You must not aim at a trifling advance in calmness or knowledge or insight because it's nothing. You've got to work at it. It says in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 18, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, and watching with all perseverance, which is persistence. Go on and continue. Asking earnestly. In other words, you've got to be persistent. You've got to continue to work at it, no matter how long it takes. But you know there are people who meditate a few times and then decide that they're going to teach the world. And Buddha says, eventually they'll fall into idleness and will inevitably face suffering again. But then Buddha now with us tonight touches on the mind and our misunderstanding of the mind. And maybe, Lynn, this is what we were talking about before, about the lady who went to Tennessee and had an accident, was killed. Maybe this is, Buddha has an answer for that. He said, the world has no substance of its own. Nothing. It is a vast concordance of causes that originate solely in the mind, that is stimulated by ignorance, false imagination, and desires. And what he says, there is nothing there to hurt anybody. But when the mind of people who have not received instruction from within, when these minds are stimulated, problems occur. And now you have people all of a sudden doing things that other people said they should do, and all kinds of crazy stuff is going on, and the world, which is a pure place, becomes a muddled place. And you talk about accidents, you talk about people getting killed. Listen to what he said. The world has no substance. It is nothing. It is simply a vast concordance of causes. These things happened because of the ideas that originated in the mind, which was stimulated by ignorance, false imagination, and desires. In other words, your mind was stimulated by false teachings of other people that caused you to go out and take actions, and in most cases, you paid the penalty for it. The lady went to Tennessee. She had an accident and she was killed. I don't know what the details of the accident were. But she could have been coming down the street, having nothing to do with fate. She She could be coming down the street, minding her own business in her car. And here's somebody coming this way. And somebody said, here, hey, come on, you're okay. Stay with us and have a couple more drinks. By this false witness that was put into the mind of this person who submitted to it, the person may have become drunk and hit that woman and killed her. And what was the reaction? What was the cause? It wasn't fate. It wasn't maybe even necessarily negligence. But somebody else might have had a false idea put into their head which caused them to be less alert than they should have been. And in other words, the accident was caused by that which was put into the mind of the person who was actually a vehicle for the accident. And that's what Buddha is saying. And all of these things happen. Oh, Mr. President, the thing that you should do is drop the atomic bomb. Oh, Mr. President, the thing that you should do is send 60,000 American soldiers into Vietnam. All of these things don't happen. In Vietnam, there are trees. There are rice paddies. There are people with oxen. And all of a sudden, somebody whispers into the ear. And then somebody else says, I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good idea. And the next thing, they got Agent Orange, and they're defoliating the damn thing, and there's bombs blowing up, and there's little kids on fire, and there's villages burning down. Why? Because of the suggestions that entered into the mind of people who push buttons. Otherwise, there'd be trees there. Otherwise, there'd be little children there doing whatever the little children do. This is what Buddha is trying to say. The causes of all of the horror are the ideas that are stimulated into the mind by people who are ignorant. Watch them on television about this abortion thing. They hold up signs. They're murderers. And there is somebody who cannot take that, and they get a gun, and they kill, thinking they're killing murderers. They weren't going to do it before, but something has been put into their mind to stimulate them, and they go out and they do something. And so they say, oh, why does God let these things happen? God gives you a mind, and God gives you the ability to communicate to other people. But you're communicating to other people with that which is ignorance that you got from somebody else. Religion is nothing more than you having faith in somebody else's idea. That has nothing to do with God, because God never wrote anything anywhere. God only writes in that which is invisible ink inside of your head. But when you go and say, I have faith, I believe, what do you believe? You believe what somebody else told you. That's it. You have to find for yourself. Read it again. The world has no substance of its own. It is a vast concordance of causes that originate solely in the mind, that is stimulated by ignorance, false imagination, and desires. Do you want all in here and everybody out there understand that? Because I want to show you Scripture. And I want you to look at Scripture. Go to page 627 of the book of Jeremiah. Page 627 to the book of Jeremiah. And go to Jeremiah chapter 5. Turning it up. Oh, yeah, well, you got to turn the heat up. Let me read you again. Buddha. The world has no substance of its own. It is a vast concordance of causes that originate solely in the mind, that is stimulated by ignorance, false imagination, and desires. Jeremiah, page 627, chapter 5, verse 31. The prophets prophesy falsely, the priests bear rule by their means, and my people love to have it so. And what will you do in the end thereof? The prophets prophesy falsely. And the priests, in other words, what it says is the prophets prophesied into a book, and the religious preachers and teachers and evangelists and priests and ministers bared rule. They said, you've got to do this because the prophet said it. And then the book says, and my people love to have it that way. Oh, thank you, Father. Oh, yes, yes, Reverend. Oh, yes. Oh, God love you all. And it says it's a fake and a fraud. And what are you going to do in the end? Because you're not going to know nothing. Isn't it? I'm finished. Oh, guys, come in. Well, you might open the door. Huh? Okay. Now, let me tell you what Buddha says. We're almost finished. Buddha says the mind itself manifests its own delusions. The mind manifests its own delusions. Your mind will build up and transmit back to you this bizarre thing. And it says, according to Buddha, it is built up out of desire. It thrives in pain caused by its own anger and infatuation. Your mind does that. It doesn't even make any difference. You know what happens to your stomach when you eat the wrong stuff?